This video is going to look at translating word problems into equations. So how do you translate an equal sign? Well, just like other words that mean addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, there are words that can be written that mean we would enter an equal sign at that point. So we got equals, gives, so if it gives us a certain amount, is, was, or should be. So if you're looking at working on a budget or you can't go over something, so it should be a certain dollar amount. Yield means it gives you, amounts to, represents, and is the same as. So when we're looking through these problems, we obviously have problem-solving techniques. And these are important to just kind of keep in mind as we go through word problems in general. So we need to understand the problem. What is the problem asking you to solve? We're going to read it and we're going to reread it. We're going to choose a variable to represent the unknown, so we have to identify that unknown. So what are we trying to find in the problem? Construct a drawing if that helps. Some of us are visual learners, so we could absolutely draw a picture to represent what the problem is telling us to get a visual of that. Propose a solution and check. Translate the problem into an equation, solve the equation, interpret the results, check, state your conclusion. Okay, so just good things to keep in mind as we move forward. So we're going to start with just some really direct ones and see what we can find out. So it says twice a number plus 3 is the same as the number minus 6. Find the number. So what's the problem asking us? Well, it's saying what's the number? We have to find this missing value. So when it says find the number, anytime we see a number, let's put in n. So twice a number, twice means you double something, you multiply it by 2. So 2 times a number, that's 2n. Then it says plus 3, so add 3, is the same as, those are clue words for an equal sign, the number minus 6. So the number, which was n, minus 6. And remember, our turnaround words are are than and from. So if this said is the same as the number less than 6, so then that would mean I have to flip that order there. Okay. All right, so now that I wrote this equation, I can now solve it. So let's get the variables on the same side. So I'm going to subtract n to get rid of those. 2 n's minus 1 n's gives me a single n left. Drop down the plus 3, the equal sign, and now I have a minus 6 left. So then let's subtract the 3, and you get n equals negative 9. So what's the number we're trying to find? Negative 9. Good. Let's look at this one. The product of twice a number and 3 is the same as the difference of 5 times the number and 3/4. Find the number. So again, we're trying to figure out what is this number. So a number is our unknown, and we're going to give that n. So the product of twice a number and 3. So product means to multiply. Twice tells me to multiply it by 2. So twice a number. So product of twice a number and 3, so that's times 3, is the same as, clue word for equals, the difference of 5 times the number and 3/4. So difference tells me to subtract. But remember, when I see the and of surrounding that, it has to go in parentheses. So 5 times that, so 5, and then in parentheses goes that difference. No, I apologize. It's just 5 times the number minus 3/4. And again, I could put that in parentheses. So let's simplify this side. 2n times 3 is 6n equals. Now these parentheses that are here are not necessarily necessary. So this the and of that were right here do tell me to put it in parentheses, but because there's no multiplication of that difference, then I can just do away with them. So then that's 5n minus 3/4. So I'm going to subtract this 5n to get my n's on the same side. That gives me 6n's minus 5n's is just a single n. And that leaves me with that negative 3/4, which is the number we're trying to find. Okay, so just like than and from tell me to flip the order whenever I see the and of surrounding a clue word, that tells me to put it in parentheses. Good. So let's move on to one that has a bit of some context to it. So it says, a car rental agency advertised renting a Buick Century for $24.95 per day and 29 cents per mile. If you rent this car for 2 days, how many whole miles can you drive on $100? So if I'm looking at this, so a good strategy, if we kind of have a hard time writing it, is figure out, well, what's my total? What's my grand total, what we're looking for? So in this case, we're looking at renting a car. So your grand total is going to be this $100. So I know that no matter what, whatever I do when I rent this car, how many days I rent it, how many miles I drive it, I cannot go over this $100 because that's my budget. So we'll put that equals 100 first. Now, if I come back up here to this part where it says for $24.95 per day and 29 cents per mile, this is going to give me the start of what goes on this side of my equation. So if I see $24.95 per day, that means I would take that price and I would multiply it by the amount of days. So I'm going to times that by the amount of days. So the question is, do you know the amount of days? And the answer to that is yes. Right here it says for 2 days. So we're going to multiply that by 2. So that's $24.95 one day, $24.95 the next day. Well then, just like any time you're renting a car, or if you're looking at your cell phone bill, you have this daily or monthly rate. And then we're going to add to it our minute or mile rate. So then this 29 cents times the number of miles. So do I know the amount of miles? Does the problem say you're going to drive this many miles? And the answer to that is no, because the question says right here, how many whole miles can you drive? That is our unknown. So the number of miles is our unknown, and we'll make it an M. Okay, so let's go ahead and solve it. So $24.95 times 2 gives me $49.90, plus the 29 cents times the miles equals 100. Okay, now let's subtract that, and we get $50.10. Now divide by this coefficient of 29 cents. And I got M equals, and it gives me a decimal, that's 172.7586 ... Okay, so I set up my equation, I solved it. Now let's make sure we answered the question. So it says, how many whole miles can you drive on $100? Well, the answer I got is not a whole number. So I have to figure out, well, what does that mean? So would my answer be 172, or would I round this up to 173? So if I have $100 as my budget, could I drive 173 miles? And the answer is no, because if I take this and round it up, that means I'm going to go over that $100 budget. So for this case, I could only drive 172 miles because as soon as I drive 173, I'm going to go over the $100. Now, it's probably going to be $100 and a few cents, but that's not the point. The point is the question only wants $100 as your budget, and I cannot go over it. So 172 miles is your final answer. All right, go ahead and pause and see if you can solve these 3 problems similar to what we just did. Okay, let's look at the first one. So 10 less than the product of 8 and a number is 38. So 10 less than the product of 8 and a number. So this than tells me to flip. So that minus 10 is going to come second and not first. So make sure you don't have 10 minus. You have the minus 10 in the end. So then the product of 8 and a number is 8n. And that is 38. So it should be 8n minus 10 equals 38 because of this than. So make sure you take note of that if your order was off. So let's add the 10. I get 8n equals 48. Divide by the 8. And I get n equals 6. So you should have got 6 as your answer. So make sure you check your mistakes and highlight it so we don't make them again. All right, let's look at the next one. The cost of downloading a song is $1.29 for the first song, for the first song, and 80 cents for each additional song. How many songs can you download for under $10? Okay, so again, let's start with our total. So it's got to be under 10. All right, so it's $129 for the first song and then 80 cents for each additional song. Well, our unknown is the number of songs because it says how many songs. So it's 129 for the first. Then I'm going to add to that 80 cents per every additional song. Okay, so $120 for the first song, $1.29 for the first song, and then 80 cents times the number of additional songs. If I add those two prices together, that's going to give me my grand total. So we're trying to figure out what does that S have to be to keep it under $10. All right, so let's subtract $1.29. And that gives you $8.71. And again, I'm using a calculator to do my math as you could. So set up the equation and then work through and show your steps. Divide by the 80 cents. And that gave me 10.8875. Okay, so set up the equation and we solved it. Now if I go back and reflect on the question, it says how many songs can you download for under $10? Okay, well, I'm not going to download 0.8875 of a song. So could I download 11 songs and keep it under my $10 budget? No, I couldn't. So the number of songs you could download to keep it under 10 would be 10 songs. Okay, so make sure that you're not rounding it up if it doesn't make sense to round up. So if we're trying to stay within a budget, I can't go up. That's going to increase my price. All right, and the last one on this one. Twice the difference of 6 and a number yields half the number plus 4. All right, so twice the difference of 6 and a number. So twice means I'm going to multiply by 2. The difference of, the and of surrounding the difference means I have to put this in parentheses. So 6 minus a number has to go in parentheses. So I'm taking twice, so I'm multiplying by 2 by this whole difference. So that's why it would yield 2 parentheses 6 minus n. Then yields means equals half the number plus 4. Okay, so half means I could divide by 2 or I could multiply by a half, either way. Half the number, so let's do n divided by 2 plus 4. Okay, so let's distribute this first. Get 12 minus 2n equals what I had. All right, now let's shuffle some things around first here. Okay, so you could have solved this a few different ways. So because this n is within this top of this fraction, I'm going to solve this a little differently, but you could have done it slightly different and still yielded the same answer. Okay, so this one's a little tough. So I'm going to subtract this 4 first to bring it over here to that other constant. That's going to give me 8 minus 2n equals n over 2. Now I'm going to get rid of this fraction, this n divided by 2, by multiplying by 2. But then I'm going to multiply this whole side by 2 as well. Now that's going to pull that n on the right side out of the parentheses, or out of the fraction, which is what I want. This is going to give me 16 minus 4n. Now I can go ahead and combine these n's. And that's going to give me 16 equals 5n. And then divide by 5. And that's going to give me 16 fifths, or that would be 3 1/5 equals n. Okay, so look at your equation, make sure you interpret it, and again, if you made some mistakes, make sure you change them, correct them. So things to highlight in there, remember that when it says the difference of or the sum of, the and the of tell me to put that difference or sum in parentheses. That was key there. And then half, we can either interpret as divided by 2 or times a half, whichever one kind of works for you. Either way, you would have gotten the same answer. Okay, so we're going to move on, do 3 more together. These are a little tougher. Same concept though. So the measure of the second angle of a triangle is twice the measure of the smallest angle. The measure of the third angle of the triangle is 3 times the measure of the smallest angle. Find the measures of the angles. Okay, so this problem is saying, all right, let's take this triangle and figure out what's angle 1, what's angle 2, what's angle 3. Okay, so let's just divvy them up just like that. So it says the measure of the second angle of a triangle is twice the measure of the smallest angle. So right here it's second angle, twice the smallest. So twice means times it by 2. And then we'll just make this an A for angle, but it's twice the smallest. Okay, so our A is representing our smallest angle. Okay, all right, so that took care of that first sentence. The second sentence says the measure of the third angle of the triangle is 3 times the measure of the smallest angle. So angle 3 is 3 times the measure of the smallest. Takes care of that one. Okay, well, in order to figure out, I'm right here, I'm still missing. So what is angle 1? Well, angle 1 must be the smallest. Okay, so angle 2 was compared to this. Angle 3 was compared to this. So A is angle 1. Okay, but we might be sitting there thinking, Okay, now what do I do with that? Because nowhere in this equation does it tell me a total. This is kind of assuming that you remember what do the sum of 3 angles of the triangle add up to. And that would be 180 degrees. So all triangle angles add to 180. So that means I would take angle 1, which is A, plus angle 2, which is 2A, plus angle 3, which is 3A, and that's going to give me 180. So that would be 1A plus 2A's plus 3A's, which is 6A's. Divide by 6, and you get A equals 30. So if I take that, plug it back up here, that means angle 1 is 30. Angle 2 would then be what? 2 times that 30, which is 60. Angle 3 would be 3 times that 30, which is 90. So the measure of all the angles are 30, 60, 90. And again, if you added these up, you would get 180. Not real difficult, but this problem was assuming that you remembered that. Okay, the sum of 3 consecutive even integers is 252. Find the integers. Okay, so before we write this out, let's talk about that for a minute. Let's talk about this phrase right here. Consecutive even integers. Consecutive means in a row. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those are consecutive. Consecutive evens would be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, so on. Consecutive odds would be 1, 3, 5, 7, and so on. Okay, so they're in a row, right? So what we're about to do works for consecutive even or consecutive odd. Okay, so the first is going to be n, because we don't know it, so we give it n. Your second consecutive, so if we're talking about even or odd, okay, either one, even or odd. And how do I get from 2 to 4? Well, you add 2. How do you get from 4 to 6? You add 2. 6 to 8, you add 2. So no matter what your starting integer is, to get to the next even, or even to the next odd, you're going to take it and add 2. Okay, well, how would I get to my third consecutive? In other words, how do I get from 2 to 6? Well, I add 2, and I add 2, which means you add 4. How would you get from 4 to 8? You add 4. Okay, so this setup here that we have right there, I could continue. The next consecutive would be n plus 6. The next consecutive would be n plus 8. Okay, so we can see that pattern. That would work for even odds. So the point is that if the problem says consecutive even integers or consecutive odd integers, you're always going to have this setup. So 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. You add 2, add 2, add 2, add 2. To jump and go from 1 to 5, you would add 4. 3 to 7, you would add 4. Okay, so just trying to prove my point that it doesn't matter, so take note of that, even or odds. Okay, but for this problem, I only want the first 3, so I don't need this fourth one, and I don't need the fifth one. So the sum means to add, so take your first one, add your second one, add your third one. Okay, here's 1, here's 2, here's 3, and I added them in between. and that's going to equal or is 252. Okay, so let's combine like terms. So I have 3 n's sitting there, so 3 n's plus, and then 2 and 4 gives me a 6. Okay, so let's subtract the 6. And I get 246. Divide by the coefficient of 3. I get 82. So when n is 82, that means my first one is 82. What's your next one? 84. What's your next one? 86. So these would be my 3 consecutive even integers that I could add up to get 252. Okay, all right, let me just do one more thing with you before we move on to the next problem, just in case it pops up. Okay, so we talked about how to represent consecutive even or odd, and you represent them the same way. Okay, well, let's say it doesn't say even or odd, and it takes it out, and it just says consecutive integers. Well, consecutive integers are evens or odds, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that pattern is going to look a little bit different, because if I'm starting at 1 to get to 2, I add 1. 2 to 3, you add 1. So this second integer would be a plus 1. And then if I wanted to skip, I would add 2. So that pattern would just be going up by 1s instead of going up by 2s like the evens or the odds. Okay, so that's what it would look like for consecutive integers, not even or odd. Okay, let's look at the next one. 331 students went on a field trip. 6 buses were filled and 7 students traveled in cars. How many students were in each bus? So the question says how many students were in each bus. So our unknown is number students in bus. So we'll make that a B. Okay, so let's start with the total. Do I know the total? Yes, it was 331 students went on that field trip. Okay, well then, as I was going on the field trip, we had bus students and car students. So there were 6 buses. So that's 6 buses. Plus 7 students rode in cars. So it doesn't say seven students or 7 cars. It just says 7 total students. So that's 7 students. So here's our bus riders. Here's our car riders. Okay, now let's go ahead and solve it. So subtract the 7, get 6 buses equals 324, divide by the coefficient of 6. You get 54 buses. Okay. All right, go ahead and pause, give yourself some time to catch up, but then do these 3 problems and see what you can get. Okay, the first one, the sum of 3 consecutive numbers. So our consecutive numbers are n plus 1, n plus 2. Okay, so it doesn't say consecutive even or consecutive odd, so the pattern goes up by 1s. So that would be n plus 1 plus n plus 2 equals 72. So that's how we would represent that. So that's 3 n's plus 3 constants. Subtract the 3. That would give you 69. Divide by the 3 coefficient. you get n equals 23. So the question says, what are the smallest of these numbers? Then that would be 23 would be the smallest, because once I go up here, it would just get larger. Okay, so be careful whether it asks for consecutive numbers or consecutive even numbers or odd numbers, because your expressions that you represent are going to be different. All right, you bought a magazine for $5 and 4 erasers. You spent a total of $25. How much did each eraser cost? So the unknown here is the eraser cost. So our erasers are unknown, and we'll give it an E. So you bought a magazine for $5. That's outright $5. When you go to buy the store, you take what you buy on one thing plus another thing plus another thing plus another thing, and it gives you the total. So we're going to add to that the 4 erasers that you bought, giving you a grand total of $25. So we subtract the 5, 20. These are some expensive erasers. So how much did each eraser cost? $5. Okay, so whenever you're looking at a problem that's talking about purchasing something, remember, take the price of one thing, add it to the price of the third thing, add it to the price of the fourth thing, however many things you buy, and then equals your grand total. In this case was 25. All right, in the last one, a 46-foot piece of rope is cut into 3 pieces so that the second piece is 3 times as long as the first piece, and the third piece is 2 feet more than 7 times the length of the first piece. Find the length of the pieces. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and let's just go ahead and draw a shape, okay? So let's act like that's my rope. And it's cut into 3 pieces. It doesn't matter the size, it's just for a visual. So this whole piece of rope is going to equal 46, because that's what it says, a 46-foot piece of rope. So grand total 46 feet. Then it says, so that the second piece, right here, the second piece is 3 times as long as the first piece. So 3 times as long as the first piece, that would be 3p. So I'll make P for the first piece. So P equals the first piece. It's always good to kind of write your unknown so you don't forget what it represents. Okay, then it says, and the third piece is 2 feet more than 7 times the length of the first piece. Okay, that's a long one. 2 feet more than, so because of the than, I flipped the order. So it's going to be plus 2 at the end. 7 times the length of the first piece. So that was P is this first piece, so 7P. And again, the first piece is P because that's exactly what I have written down there. So those would be your 3 individual expressions. P for the first, 3P for the second, 7P plus 2 for the third. And then I can put it all together because we add them all back. Okay, so that would be like taking a piece of rope, cutting it with scissors. If you wanted to put it back, you would have to glue them all together or add them back all together to get back to the total. So first piece plus second piece plus the third piece gives you your grand total. Okay, so I have P, 3 P's, 7 P's, so that's 11 P's plus 2. Subtract the 2. Gives you 44. Divide by the 11. Gives you 4. So P equals 4. So P is the first piece. So that means this piece is 4 feet. This second piece would be 3 times that 4, which is 12 feet. The third one would be 7 times the 4 plus the 2. So 7 times 4 is 28 plus 2 is 30. So we got 4 feet, 12 feet, 30 feet would be the length of all the pieces. Okay, good, very good.